In this unit, we focus on lipids. When you think of lipids, you may generally think of fats present within foods, such as the ones shown up here, which are a variety of sources of what are known generally as good fats. In this unit, we will expand our definition of lipids to include not just fatty foods, but also a variety of other essential biomolecules. Let's go ahead and begin by taking a look at some of the features and key roles that lipids play biologically. First off, although lipids are a diverse family of biomolecules, they are well known for their common feature of being generally nonpolar molecules. They typically are rich in alkyl groups, that is, carbon-carbon single bonds and carbon-carbon double bonds, conferring the nonpolar feature that we see amongst them. As a result of these molecules being nonpolar, they generally have poor water solubility and instead would be soluble in organic solvents that are nonpolar, since like dissolves like. So lipids, if we were trying to solubilize them, would be soluble in a solvent such as hexane, but insoluble in a solvent such as water. This has important implications biologically in terms of how lipids are able to be transported around the body. Molecules like cholesterol, for example, need a carrier molecule that is more polar to allow them to be shuttled around the body. We'll get into that more when we focus on cholesterol in a later video. Lipids play a diverse array of roles within the body. Although we typically think of lipids or fats as playing roles in energy storage, the roles go much beyond that. So I'll go ahead and put on the list here, a key role is energy storage. We store fats, we break that down in metabolism to ultimately yield energy or calories. Lipids also serve roles in protecting internal organs. A fatty layer around certain organs is essential in protecting those organs from damage. Lipids also are critical to the structure of the cell. They form the phospholipid bilayer of the cell membrane to enclose the contents within the cell securely. And they also act as key chemical messengers. A chemical messenger is a chemical that travels from one location in the body to another to signal a change at that location within the body. These chemical messengers are more commonly known as hormones. As we go through the next several videos, we will look at the different types of lipids and which particular lipids play some of these key roles. Now let's take a look at some of the classes of lipids that we will evaluate in more detail in upcoming videos. The lipids that we see at the left-hand side of this screen fall under the bucket of what we would refer to as triglycerides or triglyceride derivatives. These are typically what we generally think of as the fats and oils that are present within food and also, of course, present within our body. Starting at the bottom, saturated fatty acids and unsaturated fatty acids are common within fatty foods. Saturated fatty acids are fatty acids where there are no double bonds in the alkyl chain that is present within the molecule. These saturated fatty acids are referred to as saturated because they have maximized the number of hydrogens relative to the number of carbons that are present. By rather than having any carbon-carbon double bonds, they instead have carbon-carbon single bonds, allowing them to fill the octets on each carbon with hydrogens rather than with carbon-carbon double bonds. They are referred to as acids because at one end of the molecule there is a carboxylic acid group. Typically, these fatty acids have much longer carbon chains than what we see in this illustration. This illustration gives us a very simplified version of a fatty acid with a small number of carbon-carbon single bonds here. We'll look at this in more detail in the next video. Unsaturated fatty acids, on the other hand, have at least one carbon-carbon double bond, and oftentimes more than one carbon-carbon double bond within the ring. And you can see that double bond right here. Much like saturated fatty acids, unsaturated fatty acids also have a COOH group, and they have a so-called aliphatic chain here, aliphatic meaning non-polar. And I will go ahead and write that term out so that we will have that down, that this is referred to as an aliphatic group. Aliphatic meaning nonpolar, making these molecules have poor solubility in water. Glycerol is a 3-carbon trialcohol. So glycerol has 3 carbons and 3 alcohol groups, meaning each of the carbon atoms of glycerol also has an alcohol group. We will describe glycerol more closely when we get into the unit on triglycerides, because in a triglyceride molecule, we take a glycerol molecule, highlighted in blue here, we link that to a fatty acid via a Fischer esterification reaction, and we generate a molecule as 3 ester groups in total, here, here, and here. So this structure as a whole that we see right here, we would refer to this altogether as a triglyceride. Tri referring to the fact that we have taken 3 fatty acids, carboxylic acids, we have linked those with the 3 alcohol groups of glycerol to give us the so-called triglyceride molecule. We'll get into how this reaction takes place in a later video where we focus on triglycerides. Phospholipids, in the middle panel here, are important for the cell membrane. They are the main component of the cell membrane, in fact. The cell membrane we can visualize here, where my laser pointer is in the middle of the screen, and the cell membrane is composed of phospholipids that have a so-called hydrophilic head. That is the phosphate group-based component, which is very polar. And then they have a so-called hydrophobic tail, meaning water-hating, meaning a nonpolar tail that is composed of CH2 and CH3 groups. And what happens during the formation of a cell is that the hydrophobic tails associate with one another inside the cell membrane layer, whereas the hydrophilic heads, as they're called, that love water, associate with the outside. And one side of this that's aqueous would represent the outside of the cell, the other side represents the inside of the cell. And so here, in this diagram of a cell, around the perimeter is the so-called phospholipid bilayer, where in green we see the hydrophilic head that loves water, associated with the outside of the cell that is the aqueous environment. And then also the inside of the cell, here where my laser pointer is now, where the organelles are located, is also a aqueous environment. And so there's this other side of the phospholipid bilayer here in green, forming a perimeter around the inside of the cell that is also water-loving. And then in between here, there is the hydrophobic tails, which act thus altogether as a protective barrier that resides around the cells. And we can see this drawn out in more detail here, where we have our phosphate group, that is our polar head, our glycerol-derived molecule, and then we have our hydrophobic region, which is derived from fatty acids, where we can see that we have that carbonyl group from the fatty acid and the carbon chains coming off there to create the phospholipid bilayer when a large number of these associate to form the exterior wall of the cell. Steroids are molecules that are recognized for this particular carbon skeleton that I've highlighted here. It's 4 rings that are fused, including typically 3 6-membered rings that I'm highlighting here, arranged like so, and then a 5-membered ring here. The majority of steroids also have either a hydroxy group here at this position, or that hydroxy group has been oxidized to form a carbonyl group of a ketone. Some of the steroids that we will focus on include cholesterol, testosterone, estrogen, vitamin D, and cortisone. These are recognized for their role as chemical signals, as messengers that carry communication from one portion of the body to another. And interestingly enough, cholesterol is the starting material for the production of a variety of these other steroid molecules, making cholesterol an essential component within the body. Waxes are molecules that have long carbon chains, so long in fact that at room temperature these molecules are waxy solids rather than being present as liquids due to the fact that the carbon chain is so long that it gives very strong intermolecular interactions and allow the material to be solid at room temperature. We think of such things as beeswax as falling under the category of waxes. Earwax, kind of gross, but falls into the category. And the waxy coating that covers plant leaves also falls into this category as well. We will look in upcoming videos more deeply at the chemistry of each of these key types of lipids. For now, if you were given the structure of a particular unknown lipid, you should be able to evaluate that structure and classify it into one of these types of lipids.